Welcome to Random Access. I'm Jim Twu, your host for this segment, and tonight we're going to be talking about composting. And to my guest tonight is Emily Creegan, the founder of Revival Live. Hey, Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So tell us a little bit about Revival Live.
Revival Live is a full circle compost program implementation and Earth Cycles education consulting company.
All right, and then when did you start? When did you start this company?
About 6 months ago.
Oh wow!
So fairly recent.
Oh wow! Okay, so and what motivated you to start it?
Well, essentially, my background's environmental science, and after realizing, doing some research on compost, and also working for one of the main waste hauling and processing facilities in the South Bay area, I came to the realization and the understanding that it's about 40% of all of our waste is organic material.
Okay. Now, since we live in a large urban area, not everyone knows what composting is. So, for those who are could you describe what composting is to those who may be uninitiated about composting?
Perfect. This is my passion, so that's awesome. So essentially, compost is taking your organic material, so that's living or once living material. That includes your kitchen, scraps, things like banana peels, coffee grounds, tea bags, also your yard waste, so grass clippings, bush and tree trimmings, and then putting it essentially into a pile or laying it out, similar to a forest ecosystem and kind of the leaves on the forest floor.
Okay.
And adding oxygen and water. And then the microorganisms, all of the worms and the insects do the rest of the work and actually turn the organic waste into compost.
Okay. So basically just adding to the cycle of nature, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly, and incorporating it into our living city system.
All right. So how difficult is it to compost for someone living in the big city?
I would say it depends. I know I just spoke to somebody today who lives in San Francisco, and they've actually developed a pretty comprehensive and holistic waste management system, where they're actually they're separating, they're teaching people what compost is, what organic material is, and that's for a lot of folks who are living in apartment buildings and say at schools that wouldn't otherwise have the space to compost in their backyard.
Okay. So yeah, well, that's a good question. For someone who say lives in an apartment or some sort of multi-use setting where you don't have necessarily a yard, how do they compost?
So that's a really great question. Either connecting with their community garden, or certainly developing more of a holistic program. And that's sort of what I like to focus on for this consulting company is really connecting with the local waste hauler and processor, developing that third bin system, and then it's as simple as what we know of as the recycling process in our area. Essentially, separating glass, plastic, aluminum, and paper, and now it's taking our waste management in our home to the final step. So separating organic waste, banana peels, eggshells, etc., and then having that hauled off to a large compost facility where it's processed. But home composting is a pretty simple process too.
Okay, so for like someone who lives in a multi-use or multi-unit building, they're not actually doing the composting themselves. They're just sorting. Is that right?
Exactly. They're just sorting, and they're also probably being educated. What is compost? What is organic material? And then how can I get that? What some people call rich black gold.
Okay.
Say if they have some pots or some small tomato plants, if they have a side yard sort of thing, or for general landscaping for the apartment complex.
Okay. So, but like when you if say again with your apartment or and you're sorting, where do you store your organic material until you take it to your dumpster, so to speak, or your sort? Where do you put it?
That's a good question. So a lot of folks actually will have little containers underneath their kitchen sink, enclosed plastic containers, or they'll have containers they just leave right next to their kitchen sink, for example, and that they can put into a bag and then take out to sort of the third, what would be the third sort of waste hauling bin outside.
Okay. And so the bin that they would have or the receptacle that they would have in their homes, would those be airtight? Or
we would hope so, and hopefully they take it out. Like my bin in the kitchen, you take out every 2 to 3 days.
okay, all right.
So it shouldn't shouldn't attract too many vectors, ants, etc.
Oh, the other critters that are not part of the normal, the delicious.
That we wouldn't want in our household environment. But home composting is actually a pretty simple process too. I'm actually a certified Santa Clara County Master Composter. I went through a 2-month training to become such. And essentially, it's very much based on home composting. How can you create your own organic living material in your backyard that can then, again, feed your garden or your landscaping? Okay. And that's a good way to really keep, pretty much develop that closed loop in terms of not sending material to the landfill.
Okay. Well, let's start with the lowest common denominator. How do you get someone who normally just dumps stuff down the garbage disposal and just whips it on? How do you convince? How would you convince them to start sorting out their scraps and their organic material versus just shoving it all down the garbage disposal and just turning it on?
Yeah, so first of all, again, just to go back to that big statistic, it's about 40% of all material that's going to the landfills is actually organic waste and very much needed, usable material for our landscape and certainly for the planet, for the living soil system. And so essentially that organic material within the landfill enclosed system is producing large amounts of methane emissions. Okay. And methane is about 20 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Okay. So for those of you that are worried about climate change, that's one reason to keep your organic material, out of the what did you call it?
Out of the environment, or out of the
your sink. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and then also water quality plays a big factor. When we actually get that, healthy organic material into the soil system, that's building, worms are going to be attracted to that, nematoids, other little microorganisms will want to feed on that organic material and create this healthy living earth sponge.
Okay, but I'm a greedy bastard, right?
Okay.
Or for the greedy
I believe it. No,
for all the greedy bastards out there, is there a way that you can convince the average greedy, lazy, to convert a lazy bastard into a greedy bastard? Is there a way that you can get people to start composting? I mean, you mentioned that it was black goat.
So let's get down to the bottom dollar. So essentially the name of the game with waste management and certainly recycling is separation. Right. So when we can separate our waste, that's a big catalyst for these waste hauling and processing companies to lower the waste bill. Okay. So that goes for businesses, that goes for residences. That's a big impetus for cities and counties and statewide for us to get to 100% diversion rate from landfills by 2020, which is actually a state mandate.
So then we'll have more space for our disposable diapers. Is that it?
Yeah, potentially, compostable diapers.
I don't know about that, but anyway, so basically, can anybody compost then?
I would say anyone can. I've seen folks even teaching their 3- and 4-year-olds what compost is, why it's important, the benefit of it, and then what it does instead of, going out and purchasing bags of synthetic fertilizer. We can produce and create a healthy environment for ourselves.
Yeah, how does compostable material compare to, say, synthetic fertilizers in terms of its potency or whatever?
So many, you can almost not compare, in my opinion, synthetic fertilizer and compost. Essentially, and the main fact and point, I guess, in comparison is the synthetic fertilizer doesn't actually work to build a soil environment. Essentially, what scientists are finding is these synthetic fertilizers end up in our local rivers, local streams, local oceans eventually, and that's having a big negative consequence on our total environment. So really, getting that organic material out of the landfills, back into our soil system where it belongs, feeding our plants, feeding our agriculture, feeding our trees that provide us clean air. What was my point with that? Went off on a tangent.
No. It's like who can and can't compost.
Why it's important. Yeah.
But I mean, I assume you're doing this because not everyone is currently doing it, correct?
And for the most part, we're not, Jim. It's statewide, across the U.S. and across the globe.
So what do you see as the biggest challenge in getting more people to actually do composting?
I think really, again, going back to the sort of city of San Francisco model, it's educating people on the benefit, the cost benefit, the environmental benefit on so many different points, water retention capacity, climate change mitigation, clean air, and kind of really getting to the root of sustainability.
Okay. But in terms of getting people to see, I mean right, in terms of getting people to say here's a tangible benefit as opposed to just a general benefit. Like say for what's an average garbage bill, to what people pay for garbage.
Right. So kind of household wide.
Yeah, household wide. Do you have that number?
I don't. I want to say maybe potentially. Well, I can say this. So I have connected with the County of Santa Clara sort of zero waste program, and they've actually been working with their local waste hauler and processor on developing an internal zero waste program where they've encompassed a compost education and that third compost bin implementation. And they receive a 1/3 price break discount on their waste hauling and processing bill.
So about a 33% benefit.
Correct.
Right? Okay, well that's good. So you have about a little about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
What is your what would be your long-term goal as a composting evangelist? If you had ultimate power in 30 seconds, what would your world look like?
So let's develop this program into every school, every business, every corporation. Let's get people on board with initiating the final phase of recycling.
Okay. All right.
Compost and healthy living, gardening.
All right, that's good. All right, I think but thank you very much for talking to us about composting, and thank you very much for joining us for this segment of Rrandom Access.
Thank you so much.
Crickets, stone on stone, brick upon the block, munching up.